Don't ever let somebody tell you you can't do something.
Wait a minute, you ain't heard nothing yet.
You're listening to the Live to Create podcast. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the official Live to Create podcast coming to you from Nashville, Tennessee. I am your host, Shane Almgren, and I am joined today also from Nashville by author, speaker, and visionary Laura Duksta. Laura is the author of the New York Times best-selling children's book, I Love You More, which was originally self-published and has sold over 800,000 copies and been translated into 6 languages. And she has recently released You Are a Gift to the World, which flips over to The World is a Gift to You. Laura is passionate about her message of love, traveling the world for speaking engagements, school programs, music, and inspirational talks. She has been featured in USA Today as one of 10 individuals making a difference in South Florida in Boca magazine, in several creative anthologies, as well as on and in dozens of TV, radio shows, blogs, and articles. Laura, thank you so much for joining us on the show today. It is a pleasure to have you here.
Thanks for having me, Shane. I'm thrilled to be here.
You have a pretty incredible and compelling backstory about how you came up with I Love You More. Do you mind sharing that with us?
All right. If we go way back, it actually started when I was about 7 or 8 years old, and I had this thought. Actually, I was learning something in Sunday school about how we're all brothers and sisters, and because of that, we're meant to love one another. I really felt that that's what Jesus was teaching, and he meant everybody. And I had this idea then, kind of like a vision, I guess, in my heart that said, one day I'm going to travel the world, meet my brothers and sisters, and share the message of love. You know, my path was really swirly, as I think are a lot of creative people. I ended up, after graduating from college, living in South Beach, Miami, which was supposed to be for 3 to 6 months, and I ended up there for 6 years. Kind of really caught up in the whole nightlife and bartending lifestyle and scene. And one night, I found myself praying for my sister, who happened to be a younger mother than she expected to be, and she was now married and pregnant with her second child. But her and her husband were really having a hard time. So that night I found myself praying for her, and I said, oh, it's just kind of strange. I don't really pray like this anymore. Like a real, dear God, please watch over my sister. She's going through a hard time. Well, as I did, something clearly answered me and said, your sister's fine, pray for your nephew. And I thought, oh, this is strange, but as I began praying for my nephew, the whole idea for this book flooded my being. So it was really a sense of divine inspiration and white energy and light, and was in a hotel room with some friends and got up and pulled out the piece of hotel stationery and started writing the ideas down. A friend woke up and said, what are you doing? I said, I'm writing a children's book. So it really found me. I can't really claim to have found it.
What was going on with your nephew? Do you think that prompted that message?
What's really so beautiful about it, and people do ask that all the time, was I have these key moments in my life that I feel like were like seeds planted, or and then that seed was nurtured and developed. So that first instance when I was young of thinking it were all brothers and sisters. Well, then I was born into a family where my father was a raging alcoholic, and life in my household was really scary at times, and I don't remember a lot of it. Well, there was a time when my sister and her husband, they had a town hall upstairs and downstairs, and they were upstairs and they were arguing like crazy. I mean, the whole neighborhood could hear them. And my nephew and I were downstairs on the deck outside. And he was about 2 years old, I guess, and he didn't have words yet. And I remember him peeking his head in and looking up the stairs. And it broke my heart. There was something in my heart that day that I was like, wow, this is the experience of his world. And he has no idea. That these two people that are his world and that love him so much. But this is what it feels like, and this is what it sounds like. And I just remember my heart, just really breaking that day. I used to not be able, I'm tearing up now, I used to not be able to tell that story without tearing up. And I realized that that's what my life must have looked like. When I was the only kid around and my sister was on the way. And I think what not what I think, there's just some things that you know in your heart. What I came to know was that I wanted my nephew to know that no matter what was going on in his life or in the world around him, how truly loved he was. Because sometimes it doesn't look like love and doesn't feel like love, but there really is this essence and this blanket and this context really of love that I believe that we're surrounded with.
Was it the beginning of writing this book that got you out of the Miami nightclub scene, or were there any other mitigating factors?
Yeah, no, this had a lot to do with it, and I say, that prayer did a lot more. It was more than for my sister. It was more than for my nephew. It was just as much for me. It did pull me out of that scene, and it didn't pull me instantly. What actually ended up happening was that I was asked at the opening of a nightclub in Connecticut. When that happened, a friend's brother was opening up the club, and they actually asked me to come up and run it. And it was inside of running a nightclub. I was like, wow, this is not what I meant to do with my life. And I had the idea for this book, and I kept talking about it as something that I was going to do, but it was really germinating. I moved to Hartford, Connecticut by mistake for 8 or 9 months, but there was actually no mistake. And that summer, I actually turned 30. And about 2 weeks before my 30th birthday, and this is hard to, you don't get to see me in an interview like this, but 2 weeks before my 30th birthday, I had worn wigs for 19 years. I had lost my hair to a condition called Alopecia Areata when I was 11, and spent 19 years just really worried about being like everybody else and wearing wigs. And about 2 weeks before my 30th birthday, during this time in Connecticut, I all of a sudden decided that I was going to stop wearing wigs, which was also, I didn't realize, connected to that prayer and so connected to who I am and what I was going to do in the world. And so that all kind of contributed into this swirl of becoming myself and becoming an author. I actually consider myself more, I think, of an ambassador of love. And one of the vehicles that I have to deliver this message of love is through being an author.
I'm curious, when you decided to scrap the wigs, was that an idea that had been marinating for a little bit, or did you just wake up one morning and you said, I'm done with it?
Yeah, it really almost felt like a wake up and like, okay, I have no idea where this idea came from. I will share, and I know, this interview will be around for quite a while, but this week, having lost Prince, I actually did wear a bandana only to the opening of his nightclub in South Beach. I think sometimes when somebody is so willing to be themselves, it brings that out in other people. And so I went with a bandana, and I had an interesting experience because one of the biggest people at the event that evening said, "You are the most beautiful girl in the world." And then another big player said, "You look like a pirate." So, it's really best when we can learn to embrace ourselves and we live without the opinions, good or bad, of others. But the idea to stop wearing wigs really seemed to come from nowhere. And now I really do know that it was a part of that prayer as well. It was this huge release into this world of freedom and creativity and self-expression that I had no idea was so, there was like a noose around it when I was wearing wigs. There was so much of my life and my time and my creativity was swallowed up by wondering, did people know that it was a wig and that's why they were asking about my beautiful red hair? Or when was I going to tell somebody if I started dating them, or even just became friends with them? Or somebody put their arm around me to take a picture, or a roller coaster. It was just like all these different things that consumed so much of my energy that I didn't realize what an incredible sense of freedom and ease, and just it's almost hard to find the words. What an incredible gift setting myself free in that regard has been.
How did the car accident factor into all of this?
You've done your homework. Wow. I have these really incredible life-defining moments, and 10 years before attending that opening of that nightclub in Connecticut, I was with a friend on a road trip. She was the first person who I really felt wanted to be my friend. We were roommates in college, so we weren't just in the same high school or the same carpool, all these different things. But I decided that I was going to transfer from Boston College to the University of Maryland, and my friend Donna said, well, if you're going to Maryland, then so am I. And so I was like shocked and thrilled, and we decided that we would drive down from Boston to New York City and go out dancing, and then get in the car and go to Washington, D.C. and get her an apartment and a job, which we did. A job in Adams Morgan. She was a graphic designer, and an apartment in Georgetown. So we were just going to have the best of both worlds down there while I was at school at Maryland. And then we got back in the car and went out in New York, and we got onto 95 to head home in the morning. And in the middle of the morning, like 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, and I heard a voice tell me to put my seatbelt on, and I said, "Oh, I don't wear my seatbelt." This was back in 1988. It said, "Put your seatbelt on." I said, "No, I don't wear my seatbelt." It said, "Put your seatbelt on," and its certainty overruled me, and so I said, "Well, then I should tell Donna to put her seatbelt on," and it said, "No, it has to be her decision whether or not to wear her seatbelt." And so I put my seatbelt on, and I remember hearing a Bobby Brown song, "Every Little Step You Take, I'll Be There With You," came on. And we kind of smiled at each other, and she was driving, and I was in the passenger side. And the next thing that I remember, the car had flipped over 2.5 times, and I was upside down in my seatbelt, wearing a T-shirt that said, "Will somebody rescue me?" So I had this incredible experience. Now, I cried for like 3 years, almost every day, but she showed up in my life as an angel, and like in these just awesome ways that let me know that life goes on. And I think that that's one of those questions I feel like everybody knows now that it does, but I know that a lot of people don't, or they don't trust and believe. They don't have this like real inner sense of knowing. And that's, I think, one of the biggest questions we can have answered for ourselves. And so I have this knowing that life goes on, because the beauty of it for me was that I was raised Catholic, and my friend claimed to be an atheist, and her energy was present everywhere after. It was present in songs and music. It was present in, I got to my college dorm room, and it turned out that there were 2 stars on the door. It turned out my roommate for the entire year, her name was also going to be Donna. But one of the neatest parts of the story is when I was 10 years later, when I'm back at the nightclub in Connecticut for the first time in Connecticut since the accident. This song plays. It's a nightclub and DJ. And the DJ didn't know me, and I was standing underneath the DJ booth, and the song came on, and tears started pouring down my face. And I didn't know the song, and I didn't hear the words. And after I asked the DJ, "Oh, you played this song?" He said, "Yes." And he brought me upstairs and put the song on. I said, "No, it's the beginning." He said, "No." I said, "You have no idea what I'm talking about." Puts the song on. I start crying. I don't hear the words again. He sends me a cassette to South Beach, where I was living at the time, and I hear the words to the song, and the song is called "Shine," and it says, "There will be feelings you have never felt. There will be questions in your mind. Your sister left your side to help you grow, and now she watches while you shine. The soul of an angel, touched from above. Your spirit is shining, surrounded by love." I mean, it just doesn't even seem like there could be a song with those words in it. And then to have that affirmation, 10 years later back in Connecticut for the first time. And that was the night that I had the idea for the book. So kind of all these awesome, energetic, angelic, creative seeds kind of popping that night.
And you've kind of embraced that message, because that's one of the things I know in your videos on your website is you finish them with telling people to shine.
Yeah. We ended up self-publishing the book, and I signed my name Keep Shining, because I have an angel by my side who reminds me to keep shining. So I've probably signed, I'd say well over 30,000 copies, maybe 50,000 copies of my book. And Keep Shining with a exclamation point with a star on it, or a Duksta. So, and I would often get, and I don't know if I get it quite as much anymore. I haven't had the company I shine for a while now, but people used to always say, you glow, there's just something about you. I'm like, well, if you answer your phone every morning, good morning, this is Laura, I shine, can I help you? So, you start to take on those words.
So you refer to yourself as an ambassador of love. Can you go into some detail about what you mean by that?
Yeah, I think it goes back to that idea that I had when I was a child of wanting to travel the world, meet my brothers and sisters, and share the message of love. That I just really do believe that we're all brothers and sisters, and that we live on this small planet, and that we really just haven't figured out, how small it is and how connected we all are, and what a difference it will make when we stop fighting one another and begin working together for the betterment of this tiny little place that we live. So that's always been my goal, and my dream is to generate the conversation of love around the world, so that it helps to erase those pockets of fear that have immobilized us in so many places.
And what types of audiences are you sharing this message with?
I am typically at elementary schools, and I love that, because that was about the age when I had that vision myself. So, I always kind of consider myself part St. Francis, part Buddha, part Thoreau. I love to walk. And I love that I get to go into schools, because of my books being picture books. A lot of times that's where my audience, or that's the schools that have me come in. So I love speaking to middle schools and high schools, because I can speak to them a little bit more about the self-esteem issues and the life experiences and how I got to where I am. And then I speak to a lot of women's groups and different organizations, charities that have speakers come out, and that I get to share a little bit of, how I took this vision and this idea and having it be in the world.
And do you see better feedback from the kids or from the grown-ups?
Better's a tough word.
Let me rephrase. What's the difference between the types of feedback you get from kids and from adults?
Well, I love being in a room with, 100 or 500 5 to 7-year-olds. You ask a room of 5 to 7-year-olds if anybody's got a question, and almost every hand in the room goes up. And I love that moment of just pure self-expression. And now, half of them want to tell me that their favorite color is purple too, or that their father has no hair, or that they've been to Florida. But they're just so willing and so wanting to be self-expressed, and they're so taken by the message, and I love that. People often ask me if I'm famous, and I'm like, well, I'm famous with 5 to 7-year-olds, and it's a pretty awesome demographic to be famous with. Adults, and I love speaking with adults, and I love speaking with the young adults as well. It never fails when I'm speaking to a room full of adults that there's tears in the room, and whether it's when I read one of my books or when I'm sharing some of my personal story, and that they can ask questions, the few who dare to raise their hand and share something or ask something, and I feel like I can contribute to something somewhere where they might be stuck and maybe have been stuck for a long time. That's a different kind of difference than you can make with a 5 or 7-year-old sometimes.
Have you found it easy to translate the message of "I love you more"? Because it's designed for kids. Do you take the kids' message and translate that to adults?
Yeah, I think we do. I love being able to look back through my life and see where all these little seeds were planted. My mom was a kindergarten teacher for 38 and a half years. And it was at a time when they didn't have, smartphones sitting on their desk. So they didn't have a way to communicate with the rest of the world. So my mom hung out with 5-year-olds for 38 years. And she always gave me her favorite picture books. It didn't matter whether it was, my 16th birthday, my 18th, or my 21st, or high school graduation or college graduation. She would always pick out one of her favorite books and sign it for me, write a special message in it. And there's some of those books, they're still my favorite today. And so I think we do children's books a disservice by calling them children's books. That the message in so many picture books is just as much for adults. And what I love about I Love You More is that I think it speaks really well to children and also speaks just as well to adults. It was after I had done it, and I said, I didn't really need to write children's books, as to get this message of love out there. But I thought, wow, what an awesome way to do it, because not only are the kids getting the message, but so are the parents and the grandparents and the teachers and the preachers and the aunts and the uncles that are reading the book again and again and again. And the message is just as much, if not more, for them as it is for the kids.
Yeah, there are a bunch of glowing 5-star reviews on Amazon that are all obviously being written by adults going, oh my God, I love this book. We read this every single day. So it's obviously making an impact.
Yeah. I was just going to share about the title. And I know we have a lot of creative people on here, and there's a lot to be said for a title. And in my family, we didn't say, I love you more. Well, it turns out millions of people every day, when somebody tells them I love you, they reply back, I love you more. And so that was just really a gift from Spirit to write that book and that message. And that because of the phrase, it just really heart connects and emotionally connects with so many people that they see the book and they want it almost no matter what it says on the inside because they have this lifelong connection to that phrase with people that they love.
And my daughter's 9, and that's one of the things that we do every night is I love you more, I love you 3 more, I love you 6 more, and we keep going until it's finally lights out time. So the positive thing is you've got sort of an infinite source of sequels if you want them.
Yes, this is true.
I Love You More, it was beautifully illustrated by Karen Kiesler.
Yeah.
And together you're affectionately known as Hippie and the Bald Chick. So how did that pairing occur?
We were bartenders together in South Beach, so everything served. That's, one of the things that I really like to share with people, too. Sometimes we can tend to judge times in our life or things that we've done. But if I hadn't lived in South Beach for 6 years, maybe if I'd only been there for 6 months instead of 6 years, I might not have met Karen, and I may not have been at the opening of this nightclub. So Karen and I bartended together, and a friend of mine was supposed to do the illustrations, who's a big graffiti artist, and he actually had just gotten super busy with all this work for Rolling Stone magazine, and he said, Laura, I'm just not going to be able to do the book right now. And I was looking for a mutual friend's number who I knew was an artist, and Karen piped in and said, well, why? What do you have? And I said, well, I wrote this book about love. And she said, well, I may not be a famous artist, but I know what love looks like to a 5-year-old. And I had seen a picture that she had drawn that I really loved of the ocean. And she pulled out a bag of pastel chalk she had gotten at a yard sale for 50 cents. And we sat down kind of together and drew the pictures. And she just did an incredible job. A real, I feel like she tuned into her inner child and drew these pictures.
Your books are flip books, which means they read to the middle. You can flip over the front and start on the back, and both sides read to the middle. What did that decision come from?
What I love about the whole process is that the way that the book was written, when it was so divinely inspired, it was very much written for my nephew. So I have that actual sheet of paper, and I bring it to my school visits, and I talk to the students about the editorial process and how important it is. Because here was this idea that was so inspired. I mean, how could it need editing? when something just comes, it flows through you. But it was very much written for my nephew. It was, I love you more than Barney. I love you more than my golf clubs. I love you more than radishes, because he happened to be a 4-year-old that loves radishes. And I love you more than gung gung. And I had actually underlined that and written title beside it. And so, I asked the students, do you all know what gung gung is? And they're like, no. And I'm like, yeah, well, that's what my nephew called chocolate milk. So it was his nickname for chocolate milk, and we thought it was so cute that even though he knew how to say chocolate milk now, we called it, Tyler, do you want some gung gung? So I knew when I sat down to write the book, I was like, oh, this is, my family would like this, and the idea is still good, but obviously it needs a lot of editing. So I wrote and rewrote and wrote and rewrote the book until it was done. And then I showed it to my mother, who was a kindergarten teacher, as I shared, for 38 years. And she said, you're off to a good start. And, where she said and not but. We argue about this, but she's probably right. I'm sure she said and she said and not every, gosh, I live in Nashville now. Well, we live in Nashville now, so I hate to admit this in this town. She said, not every book needs to rhyme, but this one really should. So I had written the whole book, and I said, Mom, I was not giving it to me off a constructive criticism. It is done. I'm not working on it anymore. But I listened to what she said, and I was like, oh, she's right. I should really go back. And I went back and made the whole book rhyme. And then I showed the book to my sister, who I think had 3 children, her 4th and final one on the way at the time. And when I first wrote the book, it went mother, son, mother, son, mother, son, left to right, like most books read. And my sister had the idea, and she said, I think if you pulled out the mother story and the son story and had them meet in the middle and made it a flip book, the kids would really love that. And I loved that idea. So even though it meant that I had to rewrite the whole book because it now no longer rhymed, I loved that idea. So it was, and I love the idea that it was this co-creation between spirit and, and myself and some of the people that I love the most in the world, my sister and my sister and my mom. So I love, sometimes and I still do this, you have an inspired idea, like this drop of goodness that comes into your heart and your mind. And it doesn't mean that it doesn't take some kind of like, churning and working on here on this plane to make it as good as it possibly can be.
How many different iterations or rewrites do you think it went through?
I have that. I have the text that doesn't rhyme, and I bring that to the schools with me as well. And I, ask them if they'd like to hear something. If they promise not to laugh, I'll read a little bit to them. Not a word of it, right, is the same from that the first piece of paper. And then there was probably 6 or 7 drafts, I'd say, until we got to the final. And I think towards the end, we might have changed a couple of them even due to the pictures. I remember there was a cotton candy, and I'm so glad we didn't put that in the book. But I remember that being one of the pictures that didn't end up making it. So, we were tweaking it as we were going. So I'd say probably 6 or 7.
Your newest book, You Are a Gift to the World, you can flip that over and it reads, The World is a Gift to You. What message are you sharing in that book?
Appreciation. I say if we can create a foundation of love and appreciation for ourselves, one another, and the planet, that we're setting our kids up with a foundation that will empower them for whatever it is that they want to do in the world. A lot of the schools want me to come in and inspire the kids to want to be authors or illustrators. And I said, I don't know. I don't know what this child and this child and this child, unique gifts and talents and their own unique geniuses. But I do know that given a foundation or, a fertilizer of love and appreciation, that's where, people can tend to flourish. So that's the message of that book. What I'll share about that book, though, that I love, and I love the message of the book, everything kind of went wrong, and I'm putting wrong in quotes right now, when we launched that book. And it has never taken off in the world the way that, not even close to the way that I Love You More has. but I really don't believe, I had been living in South Florida for almost 20 years. I can't believe that. I had moved up to Fort Lauderdale after my days in Miami, and I moved to Nashville, Tennessee about 3 years ago. And I don't think that If You Were a Gift to the World had taken off the way that we had hoped that it would, that I would be in Nashville. And I feel like I am where I am meant to be. And so, one of the gifts of that failure or seeming failure is that it got me to this new place in my adventure.
So you're referred to as an author, a speaker, and a visionary. I want to talk about the visionary part a little bit. I guess probably before the book was released, and at this point now where you realize you're supposed to be, you had different ideas maybe about where you were going to be in 5 years. At this point, where do you see yourself in 5 years?
Mm-hmm. Well, let me talk about 1 year. I'm very excited. We actually have my third book is coming out. I'll Hug You More. So a real follow-up to I Love You More. And I have always loved hugs. And this book, where everything, like I shared, several things went wrong with You Were a Gift to the World. Everything really just seems to be going right with this book. We've gotten the illustrations. It's a different illustrator. The publisher likes to pick their own illustrator, but we picked an illustrator. We decided to use different animals throughout in the book, and the text and the illustrations, just as well as everyone's enthusiasm around the project, really just seemed to be lining up spectacularly. So that book is due out in January of 2017. I'm super looking forward to it.
And are you on track? Are you on pace to meet that deadline?
Yeah, we're good and ahead of it. I'll share a little bit about the writing process for that. I think so many people want to know, you write every day, and I don't know that it would matter if I wrote every day, because so much of what I write when I'm kind of forcing it, it's just crap, which I guess is what you're supposed to get out. Just get it out, let the crap out so the good can come out. But I had written this book. I worked with my editor. They said, well, why don't you do either like a thank you book or a hug book? They gave me a few different choices, all of which I was totally on board with. I submitted a few hug manuscripts. And we had the title, I'll Hug You More, which at first I didn't really love. My agent actually came up with that. And then it grew on me, especially as I began writing the book. About a little over a year ago, I got word from my editor, we've got a manuscript that we want to go with. Just hold tight, I'll get you some editorial notes. Well, I wasn't even 100% sure, between me and you, and everyone else listening, which manuscript he was talking about. And I was good with them, but I wasn't great with them. And I hadn't figured out how to make I'll Hug You More a flip book, which not every one of my books needs to be a flip book, but this one, it felt like it probably should be. So I'm waiting many times very impatiently for my editor to get me editorial notes. And then it was in September of last year. I was in a wedding in Destin, Florida, and then I had an event over in Orlando the following weekend. So I just stayed down in Florida. I had driven, and I took 11 hours, or maybe even longer, 12 hours, I think, one day, just to drive from Destin to my friend's place in Mount Dora. And I stopped at every little beach and oyster shack on the way, and just, sauntered. But it took me 12 hours it was probably like a 7 or 8 hour drive. And I got there after 11 o'clock at night. I was completely exhausted. I said to my friend, don't worry, I'm just going straight to bed. And at about 3 o'clock in the morning, I had the perfect idea of how to write I'll Hug You More. And the ideas just started flowing. And I usually will always get up and pull out a piece of paper, but I was so exhausted. I was like, really, Spirit? Really? Right now? Muse, Spirit, whatever you want to call it. And so I started typing everything into my phone. And that morning I woke up first thing and I sent my editor a note. And I said, if this happens to be the day you're going to send me editorial notes, hold off, because I'm going to have something just completely different for you by the end of the day. And by the end of the day, I'd basically written the book. And we tweaked it a little bit. But I heard right back from him. He's like, this is it. So that shows you that my writing process is more these hits of inspiration that then I tweak versus something that I feel like I can kind of just churn out every day.
And did you figure out a way to make that a flip book?
We did. And I had actually almost that evening, or that middle of the morning at 3:30, I'd almost written one side of it. And then my friend and I ran around most of the day. So it was like 10 o'clock at night I came back. And I don't usually do this. I would tell you that I don't typically write into the computer. But I was kind of like, I'll be damned if I'm not sending my editor something, because I said I was going to get him something today. So at about 10 o'clock at night, I sat down and thought that I would just write I knew it could be a flip book, but I felt like I had the first side. But after I typed the first side in, I was able to flip it over or to write the other side of it. And so, yeah, it is a flip book. So it's one side, the parent kind of shares all these different times that they'll hug their child, and then you flip it over and the child speaking, talking about all these ways and reasons why he'll give their parents a hug.
I know when we sat down for coffee, you told me that there is no magic formula for writing. Do what works for you. Do you find it hard to set yourself down for a certain number of hours or for a certain number of words or a certain number of pages?
Yeah, I don't do that. I know so many people do, and I don't think that it's a bad practice and habit to have. I think that there's something about telling, like the creative spirit or God or the universe, whatever you refer to it as, is I'm a writer. I'm sitting down to write, work through me, with me. But I've personally just not had much success with that. So I don't like telling people. And it's just, it's similar. People contact me all the time because they have a great idea for a children's book and they want to know what I did. And I don't think that there's a formula, for any type of, maybe for anything, but certainly not for any type of creative art or adventure, that there's a formula that you can follow. Now, it's nice to learn what other people have done and what what has worked and what hasn't. But just because something's worked for them doesn't mean that it will for you. And just because something hasn't worked for someone else doesn't mean that it won't.
Yeah, I wouldn't think it'd be a sound piece of advice to tell somebody every time you get writer's block, jump in the car and go on an 11-hour road trip and wait for something to happen.
Right. Because clearly that's what you need to do. I don't know that I figured out my formula, but I guess I do know that for myself, I pay attention when I wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning, and I think that I have a good idea. It might be something that I want to get up and write down so that I don't forget it.
When you sit down and you know that you have blocked out some time to work on the next book, is there a minimum amount that you have to accomplish to feel like it was a productive, creative session?
I would say no on that, given, that I write children's picture books, right? So it's not like I'm churning out chapters or 8 pages or 10 pages or 80 pages. So there's I think, less of a formula with this. Living in Nashville, writing a children's book is probably a lot more similar to writing a song. It's only, 1 or 2 sentences on every page. And so you want to somehow capture the vision or the message that you're trying to put across, and then the ideas to support it. But it's a smaller process to me than writing for some people.
What did you learn about the process during your first book that helped you write the next two?
To embrace the editorial process. Oh, and that wasn't always something that was easy for me. But I really do think that there's something to be said for working with others. And sometimes it's just a few little tweaks, but I am so grateful that we made the book flip book, because it really is part of the magic. In all of the books, it represents the giving and receiving, and it also represents the infiniteness of love. And the book would have been so not the same if I we hadn't done that. And so I'm so grateful that I did listen to other people. Even we self-published I Love You More to start, and we sold 180,000 copies self-published. But when we brought it to a publisher, we sat down and we said, are there any tweaks that we could make to make it even better? And at first I wasn't even sure why we were asking that question. But it was actually a different publisher that we had showed the book to that suggested changing the back cover a little bit. And it was an idea that it's perfect, and we hadn't thought of it. So working, with our editors, who are sometimes our parents, our peers, is really just an important part of the process.
What is some personal growth advice you'd give somebody? I would think when you pour your heart and soul into a project and you believe that you've completely hit the jackpot with this idea and you give it to somebody and they go, it's a good start. I mean, that's got to be super deflating. What do you say to just understanding that is part of the process? How do you psych yourself up for that?
I think as long as you're, one of the things that I think the biggest gift we can give to ourselves is what is our vision or our mission or our purpose? And then you're going to have ideas to support that. You can, and hopefully other people will contribute. But and you don't always have to listen to an editor's advice or opinion. But to stay clear on what your vision and purpose is, and then just to know that as you have these different ideas to support and develop it, that you're best off if you can create a team of people around you who are helping you get the best idea possible. And then when something does go wrong, as long as you're secure in your vision and your mission and your purpose, not to be disheartened or dissuaded if something doesn't work out. Like I said, I love the message of you are a gift to the world. I think that it's so important. And I feel like there's a place in the world where it belongs and it hasn't found its way there yet. So for right now, the book seems like, or it appears to be a failure. But I'm not letting that stop me for trusting that it's going to get to where it needs to be. And if it doesn't stop me from knowing that I'm an ambassador of love and that I'm going to work to get this message of love for nature and one another and the world, into the world.
Are there other authors out there right now that you look towards for creative inspiration?
I don't know if there's people that I'm having a hard time thinking of somebody that's living. I'm a big fan of like Emerson and Thoreau. I love Leo Buscaglia. There's a children's author, Leo Leone, who has a book called Frederick that I just adore. And now I will share a little bit. I think when I was getting started in all of this, I felt like I was meant to be like the next Wayne Dyer or Marianne Williamson. And I think that that's one of the, it's nice to look up to people and to desire to make an impact similar to maybe perhaps what they're doing. But I also get caught up in comparing myself to other people. And I don't know that any of us, we're not supposed to have the same mission and vision or life or purpose as someone else. I feel like mine is unique in that I need to find, my own unique way of expressing it into the world.
Has getting success changed your creative approach at all? Are you doing things now differently than you did your first book around?
It feels like more of a collaboration, and I'd say like it's nice to know that you have the support of a publisher behind you. I am so grateful that we self-published the book to start because I understand all the different aspects of a publishing house and what it takes to put a book out there into the world. And so, people will say when they find out how little money I make per book, they can't believe it and they want to be, all upset and up in arms about it. And I said, a publisher has all these different, they have to pay the marketing and editing, and it's their bestsellers that keep the publishing house going, and they have so many other books that don't do what they hoped that it would do. But I think knowing that I have that team of a publisher, I think that helps with people. It helps with my confidence and my belief in myself that I'm going to do it, make the next one happen.
What is the best piece of advice that you would give somebody who wanted to write their first book?
Write it. This was a couple of pieces of advice that we got at the beginning was that, and there's different. I'm a big believer that life's a paradox. So there's people that write for the art of writing, and it may never matter to them if their book ends up out there in the world in a big way. And then there's other people who want their message out there in a big way. And some of those guys were Mark Victor Hansen and Jack Canfield, the gentleman who started Chicken Soup for the Soul. And I got to meet them early on after we had self-published. And I think it was Mark who said, writing the book is about 10% of it. Marketing and promoting it is the rest. So, and I tell people if you self-publish it, it might be about 15% of it. But you don't want to end, like if you want your book and your message to be out there in the world, it doesn't matter how great your book is. You don't want a garage full of 3,000 great copies of your great book if you're not willing to somehow figure out who your market is and how to reach them. So that was a great piece of advice that we got. And then another piece was from Dan Poynter, who calls himself he's kind of known as like the self-publishing guru. And he said, find your niche market. He wrote books on parachuting and realized quickly that people that parachute and skydive aren't necessarily like in a Barnes & Noble, but they are in outdoor shops.
They're jumping off the Barnes & Noble.
Right. And so rather than trying to get our book in every major bookstore when we were self-published, we found these American crafts and gift galleries and then children's specialty shops where everybody that was in one of those stores was looking for something like our book. And so that's a really important thing to consider. And Mark encouraged everybody that while you were writing your book, and even before, and it all depends on the type of book you're writing, but to be considering who is your market and how you're going to get it there. So I'm sure this is the way that they do it now. They have a marketing plan and book proposal prior to writing the book. So that's something to consider, but it's a different way of looking at it, and it's important. Marketing yourself and being able to tell your story and effectively get it out there is an important part. Although I think some people write for the art of writing.
What cautionary tale would you tell someone trying to write their first book?
That there are a lot of books published every year, and it's I think it's a phenomena, the access that we have to stories and then like what we do here. So people hear about J.K. Rowling or Jeff Kinney, The Diary of a Wimpy Kid, or J.K. Rowling, Richer Than the Queen due to the Harry Potter book.
Yep.
So I have a lot of people who want to write children's books, I think, because they think it's a really, really great way to make a lot of money. I think I would caution them well against that. And I laugh, but I think what people are confused about is that when you hear about somebody like J.K. Rowling or Jeff Kinney, that though they have made millions of dollars from their sales of their books, where they've made a lot of money is through licensing and merchandising of products and movies and things like that. And that those are such a huge exception to the rule versus the, what's to be expected. And so it takes time. If you decide to go the traditional route of securing a publisher, what that looks like is first securing an agent, which in itself can sometimes take 6 months to a year, possibly even longer by the time you send things out and then wait to hear back from them. And then the same thing when a publisher decides to pick it up. there's a good chance that it won't be out, like even if you sign a contract in May, it will probably not be out till at least the following May, if not the next season or the following year, because of timelines and catalogs and production and things like that. So I do encourage people that if you have something and you want it in the world now, that self-publishing is really an incredible route to go, and it will give you an idea if you have something that people are paying attention to too.
That's fantastic advice. What time of day are you most creative?
3:30 in the morning. I kind of already mentioned
Your kindred
that,
spirits
right?
there.
Not by choice, but that does seem to be the thing. I love to get, it kind of depends on where I am. I do still spend a lot of time in Florida, and when I'm there, I love to be up at sunrise. And I love those extra hours that my day seems to have when I do get myself up about an hour actually prior to sunrise and head out to the beach and have that time. Living in Nashville, I super enjoy going out and hearing live music almost every night, and so my nights are later, and I just feel like this place is such a gift because we are surrounded by so much creativity, and so to go out and experience people's creativity live is, then I feel all alive after I get home from a night out like that.
Here's a question that Tim Ferriss likes to ask his audience. What is the one thing you would do if you knew you could not fail?
I think it would just be a louder expression of what I'm already doing. It would probably look a little something more like Oprah, like really just having as big of a platform as possible and sharing my good thoughts and opinions with other people. On a grand scale, and similar to what you're doing, bringing people together to talk about their creative experiences and their life experiences, so that others can possibly get inspired.
Well, I know you're getting the attention of people who are sort of at the top of the chain. I know you have a quote on your website from Warren Buffett. It says, "Laura, I admire what you're doing and what you've done, and best of luck." So you're getting the attention of people.
Yeah, I'm really super looking forward to the next few years, and you know what? I'll admit this: I haven't sat down and written out my goals for the next few years with the new book. I really do feel like that's going to open up some great doors. I'll share my Warren Buffett story. It's a little bit different than it may look there. I sent him, when the new book, You Are a Gift to the World, came out, he is a champion for love, and he loves the importance and the value that he places on children and spending time with them and nurturing them is probably more important to him than I won't say that. But I read about how important love is and children to him. So I sent him copies of the book, found his address, and sent off copies for an endorsement, in hopes of an endorsement. And it was November that I sent the package, and I wrote on the package, please open before Thanksgiving. I thought that it would be great if he had the books to read with his family at Thanksgiving. And I got a note from him right after Thanksgiving. Actually, I received an email from his secretary and a personal note, saying that he was going to be mailing me something back, and a note from him. And it said, "I owe you an apology, Laura, for having it, for taking me so long to get back to you." And now he got back to me within a month. That will stick with me forever. He said, I have a big room where mail comes, and it takes a while to get through it all. But he actually had a little bout with alopecia that he told me about when his father died. And though his publisher or people are no longer allowing him to do endorsements, he really appreciated what I was doing. And so I did get back to him and to his secretary to ask if I could use that piece as a piece of testimonial, and they said no problem. But I really, the walk away from me with that was, here's this man who must just be busier than, the majority of people on the planet, and he is taking the time to answer every piece of mail that comes his way.
That speaks a lot about him. That's pretty cool.
Yes, it does.
All right, well, we come to the end here. We've got 14 more questions that we can go through pretty quickly. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
All right, if your job only paid the bills and not a penny more, would you still continue to do it?
I can answer that very truthfully. Yes, because at times it does and at times it doesn't.
What talent or skill do you not have that you wish you did?
I wish that I had the best team building skills in the world.
Fill in the blank. I am a success if I
have made the difference in the life of a child.
And fill in the blank again. I am a failure if I
give up.
What is the single best piece of advice that you followed to get where you are today?
I'd say the advice to self-publish. Like I shared before, I'm so glad that I know all the different things that go into delivering your message into the world.
What's a piece of maybe well-intentioned advice that you're glad you ignored to get to where you are today?
It took me a while to ignore this piece of advice, but when I was first diagnosed with alopecia I was growing up in Boston when I was about 10 or 11 years old. The doctor at Boston Children's Hospital told my mom, there's really nothing we can do. Get her a wig and you don't have to tell anybody. And I followed that advice for years. I did not look at myself in the mirror for 10 years without a wig on. And I couldn't say the word, or wouldn't say the word. And thank God I finally stopped listening to that. It's a big part of who I am today, is that self-expression and embracing myself.
Well, that's a good tie into the next question here. What character trait do you like best about yourself?
I think I'd go there with self-expression. It's one of my favorite things that I tell the teachers when whoever's booking me for a school program, is that I think the most valuable part of my presentation is that the students are going to be with someone who's embraced being themselves for the hour, and they're going to see what that feels like and experience what that feels like. And I think that that's really a gift to bring that to the world.
How about the character trait you like least about yourself?
The disease of comparison and comparing ourselves or myself to others and where I think I should be and shouldn't be. And I think that that's human nature, but I get caught up in it.
Fill in the blank. I believe every child should have the opportunity to...
I obviously am a big champion for our children, and I believe that I believe that we haven't found the best way to teach and nurture and develop each child's own unique gifts and talents, and I believe that every child deserves that. So the more that we can do to figure that out, the more that we serve humanity.
If you could suggest one piece of self-improvement that everyone on earth would adopt, what would it be?
I've already kind of said be yourself so many times, so I'm going to go with something else, which is a piece of self-improvement advice that I got from Landmark Education. I haven't mentioned it, but I have a couple incredible life mentors, as well as doing some work at Landmark. And one of their key pieces is no gossiping. So no speaking about others. And if there's an issue that you have, bring it to the attention of the person that can do something about it versus talking about it. I really dislike that whole world, and I think that the world would change if we stopped speaking about one another.
If you could have any superpower, what would it be?
I love superpowers. This is something that I've actually started talking about in my school programs recently, that I believe that we all have superpowers, like love and gratitude and even the ability to hug, and the power that we have of using the words I am and what we speak after those words. But I think if I was able to pick a superpower that I didn't already possess, it would be the ability to transport myself. There's so many places that I want to go, and so many things that I want to attend that overlap, and that ability to just be able to put yourself in Africa or put yourself in Australia or at the beach at sunrise, but then be back here for afternoon coffee. That'd be awesome.
Traveling without airport security.
Yes, it's time, no, without time and space continuum, too. It's more than just airport security. It's that, like, now, be there now.
If you could have dinner with anyone alive or dead, who would it be?
Oh, this is such a tough question, and of course I've heard so many times. Oh, there's Buddha and Jesus and Emerson and Thoreau and Oprah and St. Francis and Martin Luther King. Oh, I think right now I've been visioning myself sitting under those trees with Oprah. So I think I'll just go with her.
All right.
We got some work to do here on the planet right now.
An hospitable nearby planet has been discovered, and you have been recruited to help colonize it. All your needs will be taken care of there, and you can take any 3 personal items that you wish. What are they?
Personal items. I had a really hard time not picking a tree. Trees are so important to me. I love nature so much, and so in a tree you can have the flower and the fruit and the shade and all that goodness. And I figured you can make paper and a guitar from it. But I think I would take a pen and a notebook and probably a guitar. I think that there's something really magical about being able to share our stories, and when we can put music to that too, it's an incredible gift.
All right, final question. You've just won a Lifetime Achievement Award, and we want your acceptance speech. There won't be any music to cue you or rush you off the stage, so you can get to all of the thank yous that you need and any personal cause that you want to champion or talk about. This is your opportunity, so let her rip.
I have to thank my mom. My mom has been an incredible gift to my life and everything that I've been able to do and accomplish. So incredibly deserving of a huge thank you. My parents, both my parents and my dad as well, my sister, my nieces and nephews, my friends. I really feel like this is one big life school, and that everybody's just a pawn in each other's classroom. And so I'm so super grateful for everyone that showed up to play with me this time and learn with me in this school called life. And I think I shared this before, but it's the idea that made the biggest impact in my life, and so they're words that I choose to say again, and that's that we're all brothers and sisters, each and every one of us. It does not matter where we live, it doesn't matter our religion, our race, our ethnicity, our class, that we're all brothers and sisters, and that because of that, we're all deserving of love, and that we can like or dislike what somebody stands for, their actions, but at the heart of it, in our truest core and sense of who we are love, and that it's in our best interest to extend that to our brothers and sisters on this planet now.
That is beautifully put. Could not have said it better myself.
Thank you. And for someone that could probably speak for 3 months without stopping, I think that's pretty good.
If you do that, I'm going to make you edit this podcast instead of me.
I didn't do it to you.
That was awesome. I thoroughly enjoyed this.
Okay. Thank you so much. I enjoy being able to share this bit with your audience as well.
Oh, one of the things we need to do, let everyone know where they can go and get more information about your books and you.
Okay, awesome. You can find more information than you probably want at my website, which is lauraduksta.com. You'll have the spelling, but it's Duksta. And I'm on all social media, Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, all that good stuff. So I look forward to connecting with you there. And, of course, remember, you are a star. And because of that, to keep shining.
Yay, we got that part in. All right. All right, Laura, it was a pleasure to talk to you. Thank you so much for being on the show.
All right, thanks so much, Shane. Have a blessed life.
All right, we'll talk to you soon.
Yeah, bye.
Once again, that was New York Times best-selling author, speaker, and visionary Laura Duksta. For more information, log on to www.lauraduksta.com. I'd like to thank everyone for joining me today. You are listening to the Live to Create podcast, and this is Shane Almgren reminding you to dream big, be inspired, and live creatively.